Listen close, because today I'm telling you a story so tender and so fierce it still hurts to think about. Out where the desert meets the mountains, where the nights are cold enough to crack stone, and the days burn away every last illusion, two people who'd both buried their futures met on the edge of giving up. It started so simply, one exhausted woman sitting alone, clutching an empty stomach, and one man who looked at her and said the words no one had ever dared say to her before. This isn't just romance, it's redemption, it's healing, and it's gonna stay with you. Before we dive in, do me a favor, hit like if you feel it already, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? The sun-baked town of Dry Hollow showed no mercy, just like the blistering light that hammered down on it. Shacks of weathered timber and grit clung to the desert's rim, like a memory everyone wanted to bury. Folks here had no use for outsiders, especially the kind who carried nothing but empty bellies and dead silence. Vesper Kane was exactly that kind. She'd stumbled into town the night before, feet raw and bleeding, dragging herself across cracked ground. Her dress was more rips than fabric, her face caked with the dust of endless trails and too few sips of water. At first, nobody paid her any mind. But when morning came, she sat herself on the steps of the trading post, arms wrapped tight around her hollow stomach, muttering prayers to empty air. That's when eyes finally turned her way, and every gaze carried judgment. Smells like death, one grizzled rancher grumbled. Probably touched in the head, the butcher's wife hissed. She'll rob us blind the second we look away, the storekeeper snarled, slamming his door hard enough to rattle the hinges. No one offered her a scrap. No one even asked her name. Vesper didn't hold it against them. She wouldn't have trusted herself either. The years had whittled her down until almost nothing remained. A woman with no family, no money, no purpose, had only two paths: vanish or beg. She'd walked both. But that morning she refused to disappear. She stayed right there on those worn steps, broken as a shot-winged bird, yet too stubborn to crawl away. Her eyes stung from glare and shame, but she kept them open. And because she did, she saw him. He stood motionless beside the horse trough, tall as a lodgepole pine, still as carved rock. There was no mistaking him, an Apache warrior. Long black hair bound tight in a traditional braid. His face carried the deep lines of battles won and peace hard-earned. Buckskin clothes, stitched by hand, spoke of strength and care, but it was his eyes' dark calm, impossible to read, that stole the breath from Vesper's chest. Most white people would have bolted or gawked. He did neither. He studied her not with distrust, but with something deeper. Curiosity, compassion, maybe even intent. He crossed the dirt without a sound. The townsfolk froze mid-step. A mother yanked her child back inside the store. The warrior ignored them all. His shadow covered Vesper as she lifted her head, startled. "You eaten today." His voice rolled out low and rough like stone grinding at the bottom of a canyon. Vesper went blank. No one had spoken to her, really spoken in days, and here was this man offering food as if it cost nothing. She tried to answer, but only a dry rasp scraped out. She winced at the sound. He didn't even blink. He extended a worn leather pouch jerky and a water skin inside. She took it slowly, half-braced for a mean joke. It wasn't. The meat was real salty tough. Her fingers shook as she bit down, lips quivering. He eased himself onto the step beside her, not crowding, not distant. People stared and whispered. The storekeeper muttered curses under his breath. The warrior paid them no attention. Long minutes passed in silence before he spoke again. "You're alone." It wasn't a question. She gave a small nod. "So am I," he said. Vesper shot him a sideways glance, confused. A man like him, strong, respected, feared, how could he be alone? "No wife," he added quietly. No sun. My people wait for me, but I've waited longer. She swallowed, unsure she followed. He met her eyes, steady as ever. You're alone. I'm childless. Let's fix that together. Vesper nearly choked on the last bite of jerky. He had to be joking, or crazy, or dangerous, but his face stayed calm. No cruelty, no desperation. Just plain quiet certainty, like he'd already settled the matter in his soul. She dropped her gaze to her filthy, trembling hands. Once she'd been someone's daughter, someone's wife, almost someone's mother. Then the world stripped it all away. And now this stranger was asking her to become what a wife, a mother. To a warrior she'd known for 10 minutes. I don't even know your name, she whispered. Crowshade, he answered. A name built to endure. She gave nothing back. Not yet. She wasn't sure that other women still existed inside her. Crowshade rose, then held out his hand. He didn't grab. He simply waited. Vesper looked at the townsfolk, glaring, then at the hand that could pull her up from the dirt or crush her if it wanted. Slowly she reached out and took it. And just like that, she wasn't invisible anymore. She was chosen. They left town at a steady walk, quiet as the desert itself. Vesper didn't ask where they were headed. She didn't have the strength to care, not yet. Her starved, weary body slumped against Crowshade's broad back in the saddle. His horse was big and steady, carrying double weight, like it was nothing new. The town faded into the dust behind them, just another speck on the map that had no room for her kind. But this ride felt different. She wasn't stumbling away on foot, alone and forgotten. She still couldn't explain why she'd said yes. She wasn't even sure what she'd signed up for. A wedding? A family? Some hard bargain. None of it added up, yet there had been something in those steady dark eyes that convinced her it wasn't a trap. They made camp as the sun bled out over the horizon. Crowshade swung down first, then reached up and eased Vesper from the saddle. Her legs buckled the instant her boots hit dirt. She folded into the grass beside the creek chest, heaving. The air tasted clean, wet, stone pine sap life. For the first time in weeks, her lungs didn't burn with grit and hopelessness. Crowshade knelt at the water's edge and rummaged through his saddlebags without hurry. Out came strips of dried buffalo bundles of wild sage tough journey bread and a battered tin cup he filled from the stream. Every move was calm, deliberate, no show, no fuss. He simply set the food in front of her. She ate like a person who'd learned meals could disappear. Slow bites, careful chews, as though rushing might make it vanish. You ain't much for words, she said at last, wiping her mouth with the back of her sleeve. I talk when there's something worth saying, he answered, voice low like distant thunder. And you figure now's the time. She lifted her gaze. His eyes met hers, straight on. Yeah. He didn't waste breath explaining. He didn't have to. That look said it all. You're worth seeing. I'm paying attention. I'm waiting. Vesper swallowed hard. I don't get you. Why offer a thing like this to somebody like me? He poked the small fire alive. Sparks drifted up into the cooling dusk. You're tough, he said simply. Plenty of women would have quit back there in the dirt. You didn't. I still might, she muttered. Not if you ride with me. She searched his face, trying to read whether he meant safety meaning or something more dangerous. You said you need an heir. I do. He kept his tone even. But I could have my pick of women. Plenty want the land, the name, the bloodline. So why not one of them? They don't know what hard times taste like. They don't know silence. He paused. You do. The words landed like a slap, and a lifeline at the same time. She wasn't sure if she felt honored or insulted. So you're looking for somebody to give you a baby. I'm looking for a partner. He said the word solid as iron. A woman strong enough to raise one. A woman who bends but doesn't shatter. A dry, bitter laugh escaped her. I'm already in pieces. Crowshade shook his head once. You're bent. You're still on your feet. That counts. Her throat closed up. She turned her face toward the creek so he wouldn't see her eyes fill. Part of her wanted to bolt into the dark. Part wanted to stay right here forever. Part wanted to howl and then sleep for a year. Why now, she asked, voice small. Why me long silence, only the fire snapping and the creek murmuring? Then he answered, I've waited long enough, and I've watched enough folks pass through this life to recognize when two souls fit the same rough shape. Vesper snorted softly. You think we're the same? Yeah, he said, leaning forward just a little. You've lost big. So have I. You've drifted far. So have I. Difference is you never quit walking. She bit her lip hard enough to taste copper. Tears pricked, but she refused to let them fall. I had a boy once, she whispered. Fever took him quick. The man who put him in me rode out a week later. Called me cursed. Maybe he was right. Crowshade's face didn't change, no pity, no recoil. He only nodded slow. My wife died bringing our son into the world. The boy went with her. My people called it bad luck, bad medicine. I never bought that story. His voice stayed quiet, steady. Life's hard. Fate don't pick favorites. For the first time, Vesper really saw the emptiness behind his calm mask, the old hurt carved deep. You looking for love? She asked softly. I'm looking for truth, he said. Love can grow after that. The words hung between them. The fire popped. A night breeze stirred, carrying pine and wood smoke. Crowshade reached into the pouch at his belt and drew out a simple leather thong strung with turquoise beads and bone. He set the necklace on the ground between them like a question. You take this, he told her tomorrow. You ride on with me to my people. I'll stand before them and speak your name. They'll call you wife. You don't take it. He shrugged one shoulder. I ride on alone. You walk to the next town. They won't treat you any kinder. Vesper stared at the necklace. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a rope thrown to a drowning woman. A gamble. A door standing open. Her hand moved before her mind caught up. Fingers closed around the cool beads. She lifted it. Vesper woke before dawn, cocooned in the thin wool blanket Crowshade had draped over her the night before. The campfire had dwindled to glowing coals. For a heartbeat, she lay still, half convinced the whole thing, the offer, the jerky, the turquoise necklace now resting against her collarbone, had been a fever dream. Then she turned her head. Crowshade was already up, tightening cinches on the horse, with the same quiet focus as if the dark hours hadn't touched him at all. She pushed herself upright, every muscle screaming from weeks of hard roads, yet something deep inside had shifted. Not fixed. Not yet. But tethered. You still sure about me coming along? She asked, voice rough, braced for him to back out. He didn't glance up from the saddle. You made your choice. I don't unchoose. The words hit like a fist to the chest. No one had ever wanted her without strings, without questions, without digging up her dirt first. Her past had always trailed her like smoke, choking out any chance at a fresh start. But Crowshade never asked for her sins. He seemed to know they were there and let them lie. That alone was enough to rattle her. They rode in near silence through most of the day, cutting across a raw, open country that breathed different from any town she'd ever known. The trees here stood ancient, thick trunks, rising like old sentinels. The air turned crisp, carrying pine instead of dust. High overhead eagles wheeled in slow, patient circles. Vesper watched them and wondered what it might feel like to belong to the wide blue instead of the hard-packed dirt. Every so often, Crochet twisted in the saddle to check she was still secure behind him. His broad back gave off steady warmth, solid strength. Without meaning to, she eased against him, letting trust settle in places she hadn't felt safe in years. "Where exactly are we headed?" she finally asked. "The canyon," he said. "Where my people wait. They'll just take me in." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "A filthy stranger with no kin, no name pale as milk. They'll see what I see. And what's that? A woman who knows how to keep breathing when everything says stop." The trail pinched down through a narrow pass of jagged rock. A hawk screamed overhead. Vesper shifted legs, cramping doubt creeping back in like cold fingers. But Crochet's words stuck to her heavy as chainmail, keeping her upright. By late afternoon, they crested a high ridge. Below them, cradled between walls of red stone and dark green timber, lay the hidden village. Thin curls of smoke rose from low clay houses. Children darted between the trees like quick shadows. Horses stood hip-shot in the shallows of a clear stream. Vesper's breath caught hard. It wasn't what she'd pictured. No war cries, no painted faces, no menace. Just ordinary living people. Real life going on in the quiet. Crochet reined in, letting her drink in the sight. "This is home," he said. "Where I lead, where I put the past in the ground and build whatever comes after." She blinked at the valley voice, soft. "It's beautiful." He nodded once, then looked sideways at her. "So are you. When you quit staring at your boots." Heat rushed to her face. She looked away, quick. As they dropped down the slope, heads began to turn. Whispers rippled. A handful of children raced forward, laughing, calling out to Crochet in their own tongue. He answered calm, and low swung down and lifted Vesper from the horse. Her knees folded the moment her feet hit ground. His hand caught her elbow, gentle, steady. "Walk proud," he murmured. She tried. God, she tried. A group of elders approached. Leading them was a silver-haired woman with eyes sharp as flint and a heavy necklace of bone and shell that outweighed Vesper's whole worldly possessions. Crochet dipped his head slightly and spoke in Apache voice, even laying out who Vesper was and why she was there. "No excuses, no shame." The woman studied her head to toe. Then she stepped close and, to Vesper's shock, took her hand. One firm squeeze, nothing more, no words. Vesper's eyes burned. They didn't push her away, didn't sneer at her rags or the stink of hard travel. They simply let her in. Later, Crochet guided her to a small lodge of packed clay and woven branches walls marked with symbols she couldn't read. Inside, it was plain 2 sleeping mats, a stone fire ring, folded blankets, bundles of drying herbs overhead. "This is yours," he said, then paused. "When you're ready, I'll sleep outside till then." "You don't have to," she said, quick. "I do." His tone was final. "Respect ain't talked. It's done." She sank onto the mat, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a kicked dog scavenging for scraps. She felt like a woman being handed a real shot at something better than survival. Night fell quiet. Crickets sang outside. The coals popped softly. True to his word, Crochet bedded down just beyond the door flap, a silent guard. The air was cool, the blankets soft, but her body still carried every mile of hunger and hurt. Her mind wouldn't settle. She'd never pictured a place like this. A sheltered pocket of the world where no one spat at her feet or yelled for her to move on. No man reached for her. No woman told her she wasn't worth the ground she stood on. Yet all this peace made her restless. Safety was too quiet. Quiet let the ghosts walk in. She curled tighter under the blanket, closed her eyes, and the memories rushed back anyway. A freezing shack in an abandoned mine camp. the thin wail of a baby fading into nothing. The faint fading whimper of a baby echoed in her skull, growing quieter until only silence remained. Her own screams rang out uselessly into the empty night. Blood coated her hands as she fought to hold on to something already slipping away forever. Then the man, the father, appeared in the memory. He'd taken one look at the still little body and walked out the door. "You're cursed," he'd snarled over his shoulder. "I always knew it. Everything you touch dies." Those words had lodged deep sharp as a cactus spine in her heart. She'd carried the tiny form up into the hills alone, dug the grave with shaking fingers. No cross, no name carved, no words spoken over the dirt. Just earth and the kind of grief that never quite leaves. Vesper's eyes snapped open in the darkness of the lodge. Her fingers trembled as she reached up and touched the turquoise necklace Crow Shade had given her. The beads felt strangely warm against her cold skin. Why had she said yes to any of this? Why had she let a stranger pull her from the gutter and treat her like she wasn't ruined beyond repair? The door flap stirred. Crowshade didn't step inside. His voice came soft through the gap. "You awake?" She hesitated. "Yeah." "You're crying." She swiped at her cheeks. "Didn't mean to. You don't gotta hide it from me." The urge to yell at him surged. Why not? Everybody else made damn sure I did, but she swallowed it. Instead, she sat still, watching firelight dance across the clay walls like restless spirits. "Want to talk?" he asked. "I don't know how." "That's all right." A pause. "Then come sit. Be quiet. Just don't be alone." A moment later, his shadow moved away. Vesper pushed the blanket aside, stepped out into the cool night air, and found him by the low fire. He didn't turn his head, but he eased over on the log leaving room. She sat. Minutes stretched long and wordless. Finally, she whispered, "I lost a child." Crowshade didn't flinch, didn't offer empty comfort. He just listened. "I was 18, she went on, voice cracking open. "The man who got me that way rode off before the baby came. I gave birth alone in a falling-down shack. No help, no food, nothing. He lived a few hours. I held him till his chest stopped moving. Named him Rune." The name tasted rusty, like she hadn't spoken it aloud since the day she covered him with dirt. "I buried him with my own hands," she continued. "Then I ran. Kept running. Every town, every camp, somebody always made sure I knew I wasn't worth keeping." Crowshade stayed quiet. No pity in his eyes. No surprise. Just steady, patient attention. "I don't know how to be a wife," she said. "I don't even know if I can be a mother again." He finally turned to her. "My own mother put 4 children in the ground before I was born," he said, voice low and gentle. "She told me grief is a spirit that walks behind a woman until she turns and gives it a name." Vesper met his gaze. "What's its name, love?" he answered, still breathing. The fire snapped. Something tight inside Vesper's chest loosened just a fraction. "You think I can ever be whole again?" "No," he said plainly. "I think you already are. The world just spent a long time telling you different." Tears slipped free again. This time she let them fall. Crowshade reached into the pouch at his belt and drew out a small, smooth stone carved with careful lines. He placed it in her palm. "This was my son's. He never got to hold it." "I can't take this," she started. "You can," he said, "because the hurt ain't only yours anymore. It's ours." She pressed the stone to her heart. For the first time in years, the weight of sorrow didn't feel like drowning. It felt like the beginning of mending. Days slipped by slow and gentle, marked by dawn mist curling through the canyon, birds calling at first light leaves, whispering in the breeze. Vesper woke each morning to the soft scrape of wood on stone as someone built up the fire to the smell of roasting meat laced with sage and cedar. Crowshade never entered the lodge unless she asked him in. But he was always close whittling under the cottonwoods, checking the horses, speaking low with the others. She noticed the way the people treated her respectful, but watchful. Not distrustful. More like they were waiting for what she couldn't say. Curiosity wrapped in quiet reverence. They didn't pry, they simply observed. And Crowshade he watched too. He showed her how to dip water from the stream without wasting a drop, how to find wild onions in the shade, how to crush seeds between smooth stones. He never pushed her to speak. But when she did, he listened with his whole self. That kind of attention unsettled her, made her feel seen in ways she wasn't used to. One afternoon, she found him beneath a big cottonwood, running a whetstone along the edge of a long, curved knife. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling his face in shifting gold. She approached slow, half afraid to break the quiet. He glanced up. No surprise. Sit. She did. Long silence settled between them again. Finally she asked, "They all watching me like that? They all follow you, don't they?" Vesper asked. Crowshade paused the slow scrape of whetstone on steel. "I lead them," he said. "But they don't treat me like some storybook chief." She gave a small nod. "Not like the tales folks tell back east." He smiled just the faintest curve. "Our ways aren't tales. Strength isn't hollered from the rooftops here. It's proven in the quiet." Vesper hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning low in her chest. "Do they know what happened to your wife? To your boy?" "Yes. And they still follow you." He set the knife down carefully on the flat stone beside him and met her eyes. The look was calm, deep as still water. "They follow because I chose to keep breathing, when all I wanted was to stop." I buried my grief and kept walking forward. Not everyone agreed with that choice. Vesper turned toward him. "They blamed you. They blamed her." His voice stayed even. She came from another band. Some said it brought bad luck, that marrying her doomed the birth. Her throat squeezed tight. "They told me to take another wife," he went on. "Start over, try again." But I waited. Years. Why? He picked up a dry stick and dragged it through the dirt, drawing a single straight line. Because grief is sacred. You don't swap out the dead like a worn-out horse. You carry them. Vesper swallowed. And now he looked at her with a quiet fire that made her pulse jump. "I still carry them. But I'm not meant to walk this trail by myself anymore." She didn't have words for that. Her fingers drifted to the small carved stone hanging on its cord around her neck, just below the turquoise necklace he'd first offered her. Sometimes the weight pressed heavy, sometimes it felt like armor. "You don't seem scared," she said softly. "Of me? Of whatever I carry with me?" A faint smile touched his mouth. "I've fought wolves, I've fought men. But a woman's pain?" He shook his head once. "That's the fiercest thing I ever faced. Because it doesn't quit." "No," he added before she could speak. "Because it doesn't have to." Vesper blinked, confused. "You think my past is still bleeding? It's not a wound," he said. "It's a scar. It's already closed. You just keep tearing it open." She glanced down at her hands, still rough, still shaking when the memories got too close. "I don't know if I can carry another child," she admitted. "Not just here," she touched her stomach, "but here." She tapped her chest. "I know," he said simply. "And you still want me?" He nodded. "I'm not hunting for a womb. I'm looking for a woman. And you're her?" A soft breeze moved through the cottonwood leaves. Vesper closed her eyes, letting it brush her face. For years, she'd begged for scraps, food kindness, a reason to keep going. But this man, this quiet, towering warrior, handed her something different. He gave her permission to be more than her wounds. She opened her eyes again. "Tell me about her. Your first wife." If you're willing." He didn't answer right away. Then he spoke, voice low and careful, like he was handling something fragile. She laughed like wind moving through chimes. Loved the stars, could name everyone worth knowing. She braided feathers into my hair when I came home from a hunt. Sang soft songs to the baby she carried, even before he had a heartbeat. As he spoke, Vesper felt no sting of jealousy, no uncertainty, only a strange, deep honor. He wasn't trying to erase what came before. He was inviting her to stand beside it, to help shape whatever came after. Later, Vesper stood at the edge of the river, where the water ran clear and slow. The surface acted like a mirror, rippling her reflection into broken pieces. She hardly knew the woman looking back. Her hair was clean, now combed smooth and braided long down her back. The layers of trail dirt had been scrubbed away, leaving skin pale but flushed with sun, and the slow return of health. Around her neck hung Crowshade's turquoise necklace, and below it the small carved stone that had belonged to his son. Her torn rags were gone, replaced by a simple, beautifully made deerskin dress the village women had given her. But it wasn't the dress or the braid that made her strange to her own eyes. It was the way she stood, shoulders back, head up, not braced for the next boot to kick her aside. Behind her, Crowshade approached without a sound. He never startled her anymore. Somehow she always felt him coming. "They're ready," he said. She turned, nerves jumping. "I'm not sure I am." He studied her a long moment. "Then we'll wait." A tight laugh escaped her. "You'd wait another whole year?" "Yes. But your people, my people follow me," he cut in gently. "Not because I drag them, but because I honor them, and I will honor you." Her chest filled with a tangle of fear and gratitude. "You know I'm not used to being handled like this." He stepped closer and held out his hand, not grabbing, not demanding. "Just waiting. Then let today be the first day you stop waiting for the worst." She placed her hand in his warm, steady as sun-warmed rock, and they walked side by side toward the gathering. The ceremony took place under the wide branches of a towering sycamore leaves rustling softly in the canyon breeze. Elders sat in a broad circle on blankets and hides. Women, children, and warriors stood quietly along the edges. A deep hush dropped over the crowd the moment Crowshade and Vesper stepped into the ring. Vesper's knees threatened to give out. She wasn't just some stranger passing through anymore. She was the center of every pair of eyes in the village. These were people who'd stared down famine raids and long, merciless winters. Trust didn't come cheap here. She braced for hard stares for doubt. What she saw instead stole her breath, curiosity, yes, but also warmth, fragile hope, and something that looked a lot like relief. Crowshade stood before the elders and spoke in Apache voice, low and firm. Vesper caught only pieces her name or the new one they'd given her, Lark. It had come from Thora, the silver-haired woman who'd watched Vesper walk barefoot through sharp brush to gather kindling, never once complaining. "She doesn't whine," Thora had said simply. "She endures." Crowshade finished. He turned to her. Her turn. She stepped forward, heart hammering loud enough she swore the whole canyon could hear it. "I'm not Apache," she said. "I wasn't born to this land. I haven't earned your trust, not yet, but I swear I will." Murmurs rolled through the crowd. She drew a shaky breath. "I won't pretend I'm something I'm not. I've stumbled, I've drifted, I've broken promises, but I'm still here, still on my feet." She turned to Crowshade. "I don't know if I'll ever be everything you deserve, but I promise to try. To walk beside you, not trailing behind. To raise any child we're given like they belong to something bigger than us. And to carry the ones we lost, not as marks against us, but as part of the trail we've walked." Silence, thick, heavy. Then one elder rose and spoke in clear English. She speaks with scars, not falsehoods. That is good. Another stepped forward carrying an old woven blanket, edges worn soft by generations. He draped it across both their shoulders, binding them together. Crowshade didn't kiss her, that wasn't their way. Instead, he leaned in and pressed his forehead to hers, both hands gripping the blanket's edge. It felt deeper, more private than any kiss ever could. The crowd broke into cheers, drums thundering like a heartbeat. Some women wept openly. Others lifted their voices in an ancient song of fresh starts. Vesper stood straight, tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from something finally let loose. This wasn't a trade. This wasn't pity dressed up as kindness. This was a marriage real witnessed wholly. That night back at the lodge, Crowshade sat near the low fire, while Vesper carefully folded the ceremonial blanket. "I didn't see that coming," she said. "See what feeling wanted. Not just by you. By all of them. They were waiting," he said quietly. "Waiting for someone to show them that broken things can still be beautiful." She gave a small, crooked smile. "And you were waiting for someone to prove grief doesn't have to be your whole life." He lifted his gaze to hers, eyes dark and gentle. "Then maybe we pulled each other out of the dark." She crossed the small space, sat beside him, and whispered, "Maybe we did." Vesper had never belonged anywhere. Every town, every roadside camp had treated her like a dust storm, something to endure until it blew over, then run out of town before it did real damage. But here in this hidden canyon, where Crowshade's people made their lives, she wasn't just put up with. She was asked to stay, welcomed, expected. The morning after the ceremony, a soft knock sounded at the lodge flap. When Vesper stepped outside, 3 women waited, each holding baskets filled with dried herbs, roots, and folded cloth. They spoke little, but their smiles were warm. Then Thora, the elder who'd named her Lark, said simply, "Come." Vesper followed without hesitation. That day they showed her how to pound herbs into healing salves, how to grind corn into fine flour on flat stones, how to simmer rabbit stew with wild onions until the smell wrapped around you like comfort itself. The women didn't treat her like an outsider. They moved around her naturally, passing the wooden bowl, without being asked, guiding her hands to tie the fringe on a blanket, without making her feel clumsy. It was the first time in her life she'd been included, without first having to prove she deserved it. Children peeked from behind lodges and tree trunks while she worked. The smallest one, a girl no more than 4, stared wide-eyed at Vesper's dress, her braided hair, her pale skin. Vesper caught her gaze and offered a gentle smile. She reached into the basket, broke off a piece of honeycomb, and held it out. The little girl crept forward, snatched it, then scampered back, giggling. "She likes you," one of the women said. "I don't know the first thing about kids," Vesper admitted quietly. The woman smiled. "You remember how to be kind? That's enough. That was enough." Later she sat with the men helping mend torn leggings and sew tight seams, while the women lifted their voices in soft Apache songs. Vesper didn't understand the words, but the steady rhythm sank into her bones, like warm rain on dry earth, easing knots she hadn't known were there. Somewhere along the way, she stopped calling the village theirs in her mind. It became ours. That night, she walked back to the lodge, bone-tired but calm inside. Crowshade was already there, feeding small sticks to the fire. His eyes lifted as she ducked through the flap. "You put in a full day," he said. She let out a weary laugh. "Your women outworked every soul I've ever met. They had me scrubbing roots and chasing chickens before the coffee even boiled." His smile lived mostly in his eyes, quiet and real. "You didn't bolt." "No," she said. "Didn't want to." She settled across from him, fingers still stained purple from berries and brown from good dirt. You told me they were waiting for someone like me. Why? He nudged the fire with a poker. They saw the same thing I did. A woman who doesn't quit. A woman who's come through hell more than once and kept walking. She tipped her head. You say that like it's a virtue. It is, he answered, voice low. Survivors raise strong children. The words landed warm, then sharp. Vesper went still. What if I can't? She asked. What if it never happens? He leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees. Then we'll still breathe, still build, still be whole. She pulled in a long, slow breath. For the first time in years, she could picture a tomorrow that didn't hinge on whether her body could carry life. Maybe she was already giving life, just in a different shape. In the weeks that followed, Vesper wove herself into every thread of village life. She learned to ride alongside the other women, her seat growing sure again. She carried water for the elders, shared laughter with the children, and each night she lay under a scatter of stars, truly feeling safe. The old wounds in her heart didn't disappear, but their edges grew softer. She started dreaming again, a patch of earth she could call her garden. Nights spent telling stories to children of her own mornings, waking beside Crowshade without that old fear clawing at her throat. Just peace. One afternoon he led her up a high rise that overlooked the whole canyon. The sky stretched wide, brushed with burning orange as the sun slid low. This land, he said, will belong to our child someday. Her breath hitched. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped close, took his hand, and whispered, Then let's make damn sure we're worth passing it on to. He gave one slow nod, not an order, but an agreement. They stood shoulder to shoulder. Not strangers anymore, not saviors. Just two people who'd had every reason to quit on life and had chosen instead to begin again. It started with a thin line of dust rising on the horizon. Vesper was picking berries along the village edge with two other women when she spotted it, a lone rider. At first just a speck, then bigger, with every thud of her heart. The way he sat, the horse sloppy off balance, reckless, twisted something cold in her gut. Not one of theirs. The other women hadn't seen him yet. But Vesper knew. She felt it in her marrow. A shadow from the past had tracked her down. She let the basket slip from her fingers. He's not ours, she whispered. By the time the rider reached the canyon floor, Crowshade was already there, still as stone, flanked by two warriors. Vesper edged closer, pulse slamming, until she could make out the face beneath the ragged hat. Her breath punched out in a sharp gasp. Dax Vero. Greasy hair, that same crooked sneer. The man who'd once whispered she was beautiful, then ridden off while she sobbed in a rotting shack over a dying baby. The man who'd branded her cursed and left the word to fester. She staggered. One of the women caught her elbow. You know him? Vesper nodded once. Too well. Dax swung down with a cocky grin. Well, damn. Heard a whisper a little pale gutter rat married herself a chief. Didn't buy it till right now. Crowshade didn't blink. He watched Dax the way a man watches a rattlesnake coiled in the trail. Dax waved a lazy hand. Easy, boys. No need for the hard looks. Just came to see an old flame. No trouble. Vesper stepped forward on shaking legs. What do you want? He turned that yellow-toothed grin on her. You. Or what you owe me. I owe you nothing. His smirk curled tighter. You really think you can rewrite the book just 'cause some Indian strung beads around your neck? You're still mine, sweetheart. Always were. Crowshade took one measured step forward. I don't belong to anybody, Vesper said, voice firm, even if it cracked at the edges. Dax's smile twisted ugly. Don't kid yourself, darlin'. I just want what's mine! Dax Vero sneered eyes locking on the carved stone hanging at Vesper's throat. That little trinket wasn't from our kid. Crocheted hand drifted toward the knife at his belt. Hand it over, Dax growled, and maybe I ride out without kicking up dust. Vesper's fingers closed tight around the stone, the only thing that had ever honored Rune's short life. Number. Wrong answer, Dax snarled, taking a step toward her. He didn't get far. Crocheted's voice sliced the air like a drawn blade. One more step, and you'll never take another. Dax froze, reading the cold, deadly calm in the Apache warrior's stance. You really think you can keep her safe forever? He spat. Women like her always run or die. Crocheted answered without heat, only plain truth. She ran because of men like you. She stays because of men like me. He turned to Vesper. You want him gone? Her mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed to shrink away to hide. But not today. Yes, she said, voice steady. Right now. Crocheted didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. A dozen warriors melted out of the trees, silent sudden rifles and bows ready. Dax's eyes widened. He stumbled backward, nearly tangling in his own reins. You think she's clean now? He spat at Crocheted. She's nothing. You'll see. She's poison. Crocheted didn't flinch. She's fire. Come back and you'll burn. Dax's hands shook as he swung up into the saddle and wheeled his horse. Dust rose behind him as he fled. Vesper's knees buckled. She didn't hit the ground. Crocheted caught her strong arms steady. She clung to him not like a woman begging to be saved, but like someone finally planting her feet where no storm could tear her loose. That night the fire burned higher than usual. The whole village gathered around it, not out of fear, but out of something stronger, unity. Thora, the elder who'd first named her Lark, stood and spoke. She came to us alone. Now she stands with many. A woman's strength isn't in her blood, it's in her choice. And she has chosen to stay. Nods rippled through the crowd. Quiet words of agreement rose like smoke. Vesper sat beside Crocheted, fingers wrapped around the carved stone. She leaned close. What if he comes back? Crocheted met her eyes. Then he faces all of us. Not just me. Not just you. All of us. Tears pricked her eyes. For the first time in her life, someone else would stand between her and the world. She wasn't alone anymore. And neither was her past. Seasons turned gently in the canyon. Summer faded into autumn, golden leaves drifting across the valley like promises of easier days. Vesper spent her hours helping with the harvest-weaving blankets, her fingers growing sure and quick. The old life, the alleys, the hunger, the bruises felt like it belonged to another woman entirely. Yet even now, wrapped in safety and quiet love, one last hurt lingered unhealed. She hadn't told Crocheted yet. Not about the midwife's words whispered in a filthy back street years ago, "You'll be lucky to carry again." The memory haunted her. No matter how strong she felt, she feared her body was still broken. That Crocheted had married her full of hope, and she'd only bring him disappointment. One evening, as the sun painted the canyon walls in streaks of fire, Vesper sat with him beside the river. She finally spoke. I might not be able to give you a child. He didn't turn right away. He just watched the water move past, listening to it like it had more to say than she did. I was told once she forced out after my baby died. Something tore inside me, that it might never happen again. Now he looked at her. Is that why you waited to tell me? She nodded, heart pounding. Long silence. Then he laid his big, warm hand over hers. I didn't choose you for what you could give me, he said softly. I chose you for who you already are. Her throat tightened. But you said your people need an heir. They need a mother, he corrected gently. Not just for children. For the hurt, the lonely, the lost. And you already are that. Tears rose in Vesper's eyes, not from sorrow, but from a sudden, overwhelming relief. For the first time, she didn't feel broken. Weeks slipped by. The air grew sharp and clean. Vesper began to notice small changes, her appetite shifting, her sleep deeper, a faint flutter low in her belly. First it was subtle, then undeniable, at certain smells that turned her stomach in ways they never had before. Then one crisp morning as she leaned over to stir the breakfast fire, the whole world lurched sideways. She dropped to her knees, dizzy, gasping for air. Vale the healer, an old woman with eyes hard as flint and hands gentle as thistledown, knelt beside her without a word. She placed careful palms on Vesper's belly, listened, then smiled slow and certain. "There's a life growing inside you," she said. "A strong one." Vesper stared, stunned. "But I was told I couldn't." "Then whoever told you that was wrong," Vale answered plainly. "The body doesn't follow rules, it follows will." When Vesper told Crowshade, he didn't whoop or shout. He simply pulled her into his arms, held her against his chest, and whispered, "He already knows your voice." She buried her face in his shirt and cried tears of shock, of release, of a joy so fierce it almost hurt. Word of the child spread through the village like sunlight after a long night. Women arrived with bundles of healing herbs, tiny woven toys, and cradle boards softened by use. Men sat carving small bows and shaping protective charms from polished bone. The people didn't just wait for this baby, they welcomed him before his first breath. But one gift stood out. Late one evening, while Vesper sorted cloth by firelight, Crowshade stepped inside carrying something wrapped in soft deerskin. He placed it gently in her lap. Inside lay a new carved stone, shaped like the one from his lost son, but with two smaller stones entwined at the center. "I want our child to always carry a piece of what saved me," he said. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "You were never lost." He smiled, small and real. "Not once I found you." That night, Vesper sat outside the lodge, hands resting lightly on the faint curve of her belly. Overhead stars poured across the black sky like a million quiet witnesses. She thought of Rune, the boy she'd lost. She whispered his name into the dark, then spoke to the tiny life inside her. "You won't take his place," she said softly. "But you'll mend the empty spot I thought would stay broken forever." From deeper in the village came the low, steady thump of a drum. Not wild, not loud, just a patient grounding beat like a heartbeat, like life itself. Vesper closed her eyes and listened not only to the drum, but to the promise riding on every stroke. Winter arrived quietly that year, a soft blanket instead of a cutting wind. Snow fell in gentle waves covering the canyon in shimmering peace. Inside the warm walls of the lodge, Vesper labored through a different kind of storm, the fierce ancient storm of bringing new life into the world. She was never alone. Vale stayed close, chanting low and steady, smoothing oils into her skin. Other women drifted in and out, bringing water, fresh cloths, or simply their silent strength. Outside, Crowshade sat by the fire, unmoving as stone. But the hard line of his jaw told anyone watching that every cry from within cut him deeper than any knife. Vesper pushed through the long night and into dawn, teeth gritted. She thought of the cold alley where she'd lost Rune, and swore this child would come into warmth, into light. At sunrise, a new cry rang out, sharp, strong, alive. Crowshade stood at last. Vesper cradled the baby to her chest, weeping softly, overwhelmed by the small, sacred weight. A boy with powerful lungs, dark hair, and tiny fingers already curled into determined fists. When Crowshade entered, He dropped to his knees beside them. "He looks like you," Vesper whispered through tears. Crowshade blinked. She laughed, exhausted and bright. "No, hey, but he's got your eyes." He reached out, tracing one careful finger along the baby's brow. "Our people will call him the one who arrives with the dawn." Vesper looked up at him. "What will we call him, Crowshade?" Met her gaze this woman who'd once been a stranger in the dust, hollow-eyed and trembling, and said, "We'll call him ours." The naming ceremony came 3 days later. The whole village gathered around the fire. Children darted between woven blankets while elders murmured blessings into the flames. Vesper wore a white deerskin dress, stitched by hand with care. Crowshade stood tall beside her, pride carved into every line of his face. When they stepped forward with the baby in her arms, silence fell like a held breath. Thora raised her hands. This child born of sorrow and fire now steps into the circle of life with a name. May it carry him through every storm. May his mother's strength live inside him. Vesper stepped forward, voice trembling with feeling. "I name him Jet after the boy I lost, so both may walk this world." Heads bowed around the fire. No one asked her to forget. They simply made space in the story for both sons. Weeks passed. Vesper moved through the village with Jet snug against her chest in a cradleboard. The women no longer watched her with guarded eyes. The men greeted her with quiet respect. Children called her mother even when she wasn't theirs. And Crowshade. He treated her not as a prize or an obligation, but as the equal she had always been. One afternoon she sat by the river, Jet cooling his feet in the shallow water on her lap. She thought back to the day Crowshade found her muddy, starving, afraid even to hope. She leaned down and whispered to her son, "You weren't born because I was saved. I was saved so I could bring you here." Jet gurgled, grabbing her finger with surprising strength. That night, under a sky thick with stars, Crowshade held them both and said, "Our story is just getting started." Vesper believed him, because this time she wasn't a shadow, wasn't a burden, wasn't a forgotten woman carrying too many scars. She was a wife, she was a mother, and in this land of red rock and endless sky, she belonged forever. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening, and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal bara disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals narration and script development, the emotional tone editing and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.